All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final talk. I hope everyone's still up and happy to listen a few more minutes. First, I know you did an introduction already. Thank you for that. I'll quickly do one myself as well. I'm a pen tester and a team lead at defense.com. What does that mean? What is my main expertise? Because it is quite a broad field. I mainly do internal infrastructure assessments and social engineering. I used to do quite some incident response as well. The things that I think are most relevant today are internal infrastructure and social engineering, because I'll try to tie that into cloud security and so on. What is internal infrastructure assessments? That will be when I'll be placed inside a customer's environment and I'll be asked to hack my way through it, whether that is from going completely unauthenticated, seeing if I can get to domain administrative credentials and essentially get the keys to the kingdom. And then social engineering, quite a broad topic as well, often called red teaming, black teaming, purple teaming, where I'll either send emails to people, see if they want to give me their password, I'll call people, see if they want to give me their password, or I'll try and break into places. And that is also quite a wide range, hopping fences, trying to sneak past things, trying to find a back entrance somewhere, to then again, try and plug into the network, see if there's like an extra layer of defense there. And that goes back to internal infrastructure again, trying to see what can we do. How did that come about? I quite often get the remark if I'm on a scoping call or something, yes, but do we really need to do an internal infrastructure test? Because how likely is it that someone's going to actually get access to a network? And then we can say, well, we can test that for you if you want, and then we can do an internal infrastructure test. How is this relevant for cloud testing? A lot of internal infrastructure is moving towards the cloud, and I would like to show you today how, just a few examples of how that can be dangerous, and then at the end I'll show you some things that you can do to watch out for. So, why should we talk about this? I think I alluded to it a little bit already. I'm pretty sure everyone knows that is Azure AD. Why is it important to talk about cloud security in the kind of angle of internal infrastructure? First of all, vendor lock-in. Apart from the very obvious Azure AD is massive and it's probably one of your few choices if you would like to move your infrastructure to the cloud, very likely you are in some way, shape or form already working with Azure AD. Maybe you've got a website online, maybe an API, maybe some storage blobs, which makes it quite likely that you're going to then go, oh, we want to move to the cloud, let's just use Azure AD because we're using it already. What is the problem with this? It just broadens your attack surface. I'm not saying not to do this, I'm just saying that you need to take every single aspect into account. That is where I move on to externally facing. All the things I just mentioned, web applications, APIs, they're likely in some way, shape or form connected to the internet, meaning externally accessible. Again, going back to that attack surface, but also it's going to be a lot easier than me having to hop a fence, break in somewhere, if I can just externally reach something and get into an internal network that way. And it looks a lot less strange than me sitting next to a building with a Wi-Fi dongle trying to crack a password, because I can just literally work from home. And then phishing. I know there's a lot more than just these three, but it has just skyrocketed. I don't think anyone here has not received a phishing email. And it's being tailored a lot more to these kinds of implementations as well. In the past, yes, you can phish someone, you can try to get domain credentials, but then you also need to find the VPN exposed somewhere, and even then, what can you do with that? So it's kind of made it a bit easier if it's already in the cloud, and if you could just hop to that. I mentioned externally facing, but I kind of wanted to give an example as well. If you were to go to that URL and you type in a username and a domain name, Microsoft is kind enough to tell you if that will exist or not. So it makes user enumeration a lot more easy. Say this is a red team assessment and I'm tasked to break into an internal network somehow. And I go on LinkedIn and I see that John Doe is the IT manager of company Y. I can enter his email address in that link and see Is it maybe john.doe at company Y? Is it jdoe? Is it, and so on. So user enumeration becomes a lot easier, and then you can use that to just further your attacks. As everything with these externally facing things, it makes a lot of things externally available, which makes the reconnaissance phase, as we call it, a lot easier. What else can we reach? Azure AD is kind enough to be able to retrieve tenant IDs, tenant names, domains, Azure services, email IDs, whether user is valid or invalid, as I just showed, and public Azure blobs as well. It also gives us a lot of new ways to gain access to an infrastructure. Password spraying has been around for a long time. It's literally just, hey, is this password available? You still have to be careful with it. If you try to do it on an internal network that you're connected to, by default, after about 5 tries, you're going to get locked out. So you can't just throw it at it and hope nothing goes wrong. You don't want that either from my perspective as a pen tester, because then my customer will not be happy with me because I've just disrupted their network. But similarly, an attacker wouldn't want that because that could raise alarm bells. But there's a lot of ready-made tools available that you can paste and that you can just throw a user list at, throw a password list at, and just let it do its thing, see if it comes up with anything. Not only in this case, so this is MSOL spray, which is a publicly available PowerShell script that will not only check, does this user exist, it will check if it's valid, if its password is expired, if MFA is employed. So, and you know all of this from the comfort of your own home. Again, it's just a lot of things have suddenly become publicly available, have made a lot of things a lot easier. I know I said phishing before, but I am going to say it again, just because it can be more, it's become more tailored towards these type of environments. It's possible to send phishing attacks where you'll try to abuse an open redirect feature to just grab an access token and just immediately log into the Azure environment as well. So it's not just become a matter of, yes, of course, if I get a domain account, that is really nice, but why don't I just automate the process and I'm just immediately logged in? Again, I've already said it before, but web application vulnerabilities as well. If I am able to get an identity header or an identity endpoint from something hosted in Azure that's also tied to Azure AD, I can use that to just generate access to the Azure AD environment as well. So it's a lot broader than this. This is just scratching the surface. And I am trying to scare everyone. But these are just some examples of how this can be abused. To go a little step further than that, I wanted to give you an example of how it's been possible in the past, it's still very much possible to go from a user account to a domain admin account, the keys to the kingdom. I'm not as brave as Alejandro, I'm not going to do a live demo, but I do have some screenshots on how you can do this. First of all, credit where credit is due. I'm going to talk about privilege escalation within Azure Connect. This was first discussed, as far as I'm aware, by someone named Dirk-Jan Mollema, who is a researcher that does some really interesting research on how you can query information from Azure Connect and how you can essentially get creds that are stored in it and how you can decrypt them. Before I go into this, Azure Connect is used to facilitate in between cloud and on-prem services. So say you're going to a hybrid environment, you'll likely have Azure Connect, an Azure Connect service running. In layman's terms, say you've got an on-prem service, you're updating your admin account, Azure Connect will try and will then tell Azure AD, this password has been updated and you need to be aware of this. What does this mean? Azure Connect usually by default has quite some high privileges, which can be abused and which are abused, and I'll show you that in a second. Or in more technical terms, it is used for hybrid identity. So what do you see in this first screenshot, and what is the first step to this privilege escalation kind of exercise, is we already have a user account, say by any of the previous means I've just discussed. We've connected onto it, and now we're going to do an SQL command query to get some information from the database. The next steps we'll be retrieving key manager encryption keys, we'll get configuration information and an encrypted password. We'll grab the information and we'll try to decrypt that, see if that gets us domain admin credentials. This, a little bit longer, it actually keeps going for a little bit, but this second select statement will then get us all the configuration. So for example, it's showing that the forest is named Megabank, is in a domain, it's the first login of administrator, and so on. And at the bottom, this one that also will keep going for a very long time is the encrypted password that we're trying to get our hands on. Once we've done this, and there are already automated scripts available, I'm pretty sure that one by Dirk-Jan is written in C#. So you can just have a nice exe, you throw that at the server, and it'll just say, okay, congratulations, you're now administrator. These screenshots just kind of show the back end of that and that code that he's written and how it can be done manually. To make it even easier, there's also now PowerShell scripts available. So this one is called get MSOL credentials. And all it does is execute those commands that I've just shown you. Using all that information, it will then decrypt that password and it will nicely output that my password is domain admin, yeah. Which we can then use to log into the either the domain controller or any interesting PC as the domain administrator. So I know that was really quick, but honestly, in real life, if you have the exe, if you have that PowerShell command, if Azure Connect is vulnerable, it actually does go that quick as well. So, after all of that, what can you do to watch out for? What do you have to do to protect against these types of attacks? First, specifically to Connect, the first thing that I also will give credit for is that Microsoft has actually done a pretty good documentation. It's called the Pass-Through Authentication Security Deep Dive. It is not bedtime reading, it's quite in-depth, but that's also a pretty good thing. I'd rather have that than it just glancing over the subject. So if you are employing a Azure AD Connect service, I'd very much recommend reading it if you haven't done so already, just because, as I said, it's quite in-depth. How can you protect against that previous attack I just showed? The issue there was that by the default, if you use the Azure AD Connect Express install, it will not be very secure because it is made to just immediately work, which is very helpful from an administrative point of view because you just install it and yay, we've got hybrid environment running. But that also means that Connect essentially has these admin privileges as well, which can then be abused. So just a default installation, yes, it may work, but no, it may not be secure, which is why it's quite good to do your research. Following up on that, it's very important to pick accounts to sync. Just ask yourself, does my administrator really need to be synced? Is it needed that it's also available on the Azure AD environment? Or is it okay to just have it on-prem or vice versa? The same goes for groups. Do all the groups need to be synced? Just kind of ask yourself that question, make an asset environment, and struggling to find that word, but just make an asset list, and then just go from there. And then lastly, treat it as a domain controller, that holy grail that every pen tester is trying to get to, because it can be served with those privileges. Just completely lock it down wherever possible. And if it is served on an SQL server as well, lock that down as well. I'm going to say that about every asset in every network probably, but this is definitely one to look out for. Then in general as well, I would definitely recommend limiting admin accounts. Same goes for service accounts. Try and stay between 2 and 4 if possible. That is a CIS recommendation. I know it's not very sexy to say, but passwords, please be careful with them. Try and either use a password manager, rotate them, use a rule of the 4 words, whatever works for you, as long as it's secure and as long as you can remember it, you don't have to write it down somewhere insecure. It's just as important with this as it is on other internal infrastructure environments. Put best practices and policies in place. With that, I mean, as I said, create an asset list, but also have policies in place. Say you've got a web application that you want to decommission, make sure that everything that ties into is also taken care of. It's not just taken online. Say you've got a user that leaves, make sure that that account is completely and fully removed. Just put those types of policies in place end to end that will make sure that these types of exploits will become a lot more difficult for an attacker. And then lastly, partially plugging the business I work for, but also I actually do believe in it, otherwise I wouldn't be working in it. Review. You can definitely do that yourself. You can go over all the documentation. You can have a look at it yourself, but there might be a little bit of a connection there as well. It might be difficult sometimes to say, oh, is this secure, is this insecure? Which is why I think a third-party review could definitely help, if not to help you identify low-hanging fruit, things that should be protected. This can be done both from an Azure review or an Azure AD setup review, or you could just let pen testers have a go at it as well and see how far they get. And sometimes prove people wrong as well, because I have been in a situation where people think, oh, nothing's going to happen, this is all going to be fine. And then after a few days, you just go over to them and say, is this your domain administrator password? And while it's nice, it also isn't that nice. So yeah, I definitely recommend external reviews, or internal ones. It's quite fun to do. That does remind me, I forgot one thing. That demo that I showed you, you can try that out yourself. So that is the Montverde Hack the Box machine. I've not shown you how to get into it, and I've not fully shown you how to do it either. But if you're interested in this, if you're interested in cybersecurity, have a look at the platform. They've got lots of content covering both internal and more cloud, luckily, is starting to happen. But yeah, just as a side note, something I realized I forgot. And that was it. I feel like I talked a lot quicker than I did when I was practicing this, but I hope it was interesting. If there's any questions, feel free to give me a shout. I know I don't have the easiest of names, but feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if you manage to capture it. Similarly, defense.com, I think we work with a lot of really cool people. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'm pretty sure we'll try our best to respond to that.